This episode covers the topic of how to cruise the Crinan and Caledonian canals in Scotland. These canals are famous in boating folk and are an exceptional experience to cruise. But before doing so, it is good to have some basic knowledge what is to be expected and what equipment you should have. I cover these questions out of my own experience. This is a video of my series Adventures with my Trawler Yacht Whitehorse, a Grand Banks 36. First, a short overview of this episode. We will look at the skipper's guides for both canals. Then I will tell you of my experiences with the required equipment. You will get a hint on the crew members you should have, and finally some information on how to enter and exit the locks and what to expect on the canals when cruising. Let's have a look on the map where we find the canals. Both are part of Scotland. While the Crinan is a short canal of only about 14 kilometers and takes about 2 days to cruise from Ardishaig to Crinan, the Caledonian Canal is much longer and divided into several parts, connecting the lochs in the Great Glen. This is a geological fault running in about 45 degrees through Scotland. To cruise the 97 kilometers from Carpuck, near Fort Williams, to Inverness takes about 4 to 5 days. For both canals, there are yearly edited skipper guides available for download on the internet. You can find links in the description of this episode. I urge you to read the guides carefully, as they contain many important information about equipment, crew and rules that govern the cruising on the canals. You also find detailed charts on the main canal locks and places to stay. To travel on the canals, you will have to buy a license. There are various options. I'm not going into the details of the long-term licenses that are needed if you intend to be on the canal network more than 30 days. If you are cruising on Scottish canals for less than 1 month, you need to purchase a short-term license, which covers both the navigation and visitor mooring needed for spending time on the waterways. This license has to be obtained at least 3 days before entering the canal. You can book your license on the internet. If you only plan to cruise the Caledonian Canal but want to travel in both directions, the return visitor license might be of interest. That gives you the right of 7 days in each direction of travel. If you want to travel only in one direction, you can get a 7-day pass on the Caledonian and a 4-day pass on the Crinan Canal. Finally, there is an all Scottish canals 14-day visitor's license. This is the license I had bought. It is quite cheap. 2024 it was about £40. This license allows you 14 consecutive nights on any of the Scottish canals, so the Crinan and the Caledonian canals are included. Did you like my video so far? Then I would be grateful for you subscribing free of charge to my YouTube channel to help me finance my work. Thank you. Now let us look about the equipment you will need. First of all, you will require good ropes for the bow and stern of sufficient length, at least 12 meters each, to reach the bottom of the lock chamber. I had bought 4 new ropes, as these should not be damaged or frayed. They may be under considerable strain while locking up, particularly on the bow, so you have them in ample strength for your boat. Then ensure you have adequate fenders to protect the sides of your boat from the rub on the lock walls. The fenders might get squeezed, and it is advisable to have them protected with some sort of textile. You must have fenders on both sides of your boat, as there are often boats on both sides of the lock, so you have to be protected from the boats too. Life jackets for all crew members are advised, but I would very seriously recommend that you use them at all times when being in the locks. There might be stress, and you might not always be fully aware of the dangers when being distracted by immediate works to be done. Falling into the locks with many boats around you might be fatal. To fill up your water tanks while on the canals, you will need a hose pipe, which I would recommend to be at least 20 meters in length. I would also advise to have some means of checking the bow and stern from the place where you are steering your boat, be it using mirrors or using electronic cameras. I had problems seeing my stern, and this led to a considerable damage, as I moved the boat thinking it was untied, while in reality it was still fastened to the side of the lock. I had to depend on a staff member of the lock who gave me wrong instructions. Now let's talk about the crew. We traveled through the canals with only 2 people on board. While this is possible, I would advise to have at least 3 people in your crew. This is especially important on the Crinan Canal and on the stairway locks on the Caledonian Canal, where you will have to pull your boat from one lock to the other by hand. It is a good investment of time to have all crew members to read the skipper's guide with instructions on the lock procedures. Accidents can happen, and it happened to me too. All users of the canal must hold an insurance for at least £1 million third-party liability. Please be aware that you might have to present proof of this insurance on entering the canal, so keep your documents ready. Then there is a question of operating hours. The canals are not operated on a 24-hour basis. Please plan to cruise between 8:30 to 17 hours in the afternoon, but always check with your lock keepers when the lock will be available in your direction of travel. It might be closed earlier or start later. Have VHF channel 74 ready for communication with locks. There are other rules to obey. The speed limit on the canals is 4 knots. Do not drive faster, but care for being slower when passing other boats. How to enter the locks. The locks on the Caledonian Canal are operated by staff members. So are the sea locks on the Crinan Canal. Follow their instructions on when you can enter the lock and where you have to position your boat. You can ask the lock keeper using your VHF if you prefer one side of the lock, and he will comply if he is able to. The internal locks on the Crinan Canal have to be operated by the crews of the boats themselves. On the Crinan Canal, you will have to check whether the lock has to be emptied when locking upwards or filled when locking downwards. Always let boats that come from opposite direction use the lock first if the water level is correct for their side of entering. As said, you will have to operate the lock gates yourselves on the Crinan Canal. The gates have long bars which have to be pushed to open and close the gates. Only operate the gates when all boats are confirmed secured while being in the lock chamber. During the filling or emptying of the lock chamber, there will be a considerable current taking hold of your boat. There has to be a crew member at the bow and one on the stern to hold the lines tight, but also to loosen or tighten them while the boat is sinking or lifting up when the water level changes. When exiting the locks, you will have to be patient until the water level at the adjacent part of the canal, downstream or upstream depending on your direction, is quiet and at the same height inside and outside of the lock. Only then it is safe to operate the lock gates to open the lock. Please communicate clearly with the staff. Often there are staff members at the locks, also on Crinan Canal. When talking to them, be very clear in your communications and have them confirm your wishes or instructions. These persons are usually very friendly and helpsome, but sometimes we had the impression that they were not very well trained or new on the job. It is your boat that can be damaged. Therefore, it is your obligation as skipper to care for clear communication. While cruising on the canals, keep your distance from other boats and hold your max speed below 4 knots. Especially the Crinan Canal is not very wide and you will have to be careful when passing other boats. Otherwise, enjoy the quiet and calm cruising on the canals and the view on the surrounding environment. On the Caledonian Canal, there are several lakes that connect parts of the canal. On the lakes, you can speed up your boat, depending on the conditions of the water. Especially Loch Ness is quite large and needs time to cross. I advise you to keep near the shores, as you will see more of the beautiful landscape and houses or castles near the water. You might also be interested to drive slowly on Loch Ness and to be on the lookout for any signs of Lochie, the world famous sea creatures of Loch Ness. With this, we are at the end of this episode. I hope I could give you some valuable hints on when using the canals. In the next episode, we will travel on from Carpac to Gailochi. We will have to climb Neptune's staircase with 8 consecutive locks. As it was the 17th of May, the National Day of Norway, we opted to have a good dinner at a local fine restaurant. If you liked this episode, please consider to subscribe free of charge on my YouTube channel using your Google Gmail account. And don't forget to press the like button. I hope to soon reach the threshold of 1,000 subscribers to get some payments from YouTube to finance my work on these episodes. Thank you in advance for your support to tackle this endeavor. I'm looking forward to you being my guest on my next episode. Until then, goodbye.